Now, have we got somebody else sitting on the line there?
The guy from...
Oh, the fellow from down south?
Yep. Hello. Are you ready to go on?
No, okay. Okay, go ahead, sir. You are calling from New Orleans, I understand.
Yes. I live in New Orleans,
Yes?
and I have a tax problem. Well, I don't know if I have a tax problem. I really have more of a procedural problem here.
Okay.
What happened was I inherited my house in Edmonton
Okay.
back in the 80s,
Yes.
and last year I sold it.
Okay. What did you do with the house in the meantime? Did you rent it or just leave it empty?
I spent the summers up there.
Ah, okay. So you came up. Now, you're only a U.S. citizen, though. You're not a Canadian U.S. citizen.
I'm now maybe both, but really I'm a U.S. citizen.
Okay. But okay. So you've sold the property, and you sold it as a non-resident, did you?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So the purchaser withheld 25% of the sale price, or did you fill in a form called a T2062 and have them only withhold 25% of the profit?
I'll tell you what I did. I got a CPA to look after it, and through a lawyer, he withheld the 25%. The Canadian side of the transaction is almost complete. In other words, they're now filing my Canadian personal income tax.
Yeah, well, it would be you would have been file a tax return, report the actual profit. Did you use a real estate agent to sell it?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Then what happens, you see, when they withhold the 25%, and did they withhold 25% of the gross price of the sale price, or they just withheld 25%?
The value of the house.
They withheld 25% of the value of the house.
Correct.
Okay, that sounds like they did not fill in then a form called a T2062.
Yes, they did.
They did. Well,
Yeah.
then they should only have withheld 25% of the increased value from when you inherited it to when you sold it.
Exactly what they did.
Okay, then that's fine. So you've got that. When they file the tax return, you will definitely get a refund, which will likely be about 8%, leaving you with a net of 17. And the reason is that they can now pay tax on, they get to deduct the real estate salesperson, they get to deduct the legal fees and so on that are not deductible when they file the T2062.
That is correct.
Okay.
And I'm fully
Now-
aware of this part of the transaction.
I'm sorry, say again?
Now I have to report it here in the U.S.
Okay,
as capital gain.
So what you need to do is you need to figure out what the value of the property was when you inherited in the 1980s, and that's the same value that you used for the T2062 and for the Canadian return, and you need to do an exchange for that property. In other words, what was worth in U.S. dollars on that day that you inherited it, and then you figure out what the U.S. dollar figure was that you got when you sold it, and those two figures go on Schedule D of your U.S. tax return.
A schedule.
Schedule D.
So schedule what in the U.S.?
Schedule D of your U.S. tax return.
D as in Donald. Is that
D as in
correct?
Donald. That's correct.
Okay.
And then, hold on. So you've now got your capital gain that's on the property, and you've paid tax to Canada. The tax that you pay to Canada, you convert that to U.S. dollars as well, and those U.S. dollars then go on Schedule 1116, 1116, and the U.S. government will give you credit for the taxes that you paid to Canada.
Yes, I'm kind of aware of all this, but what I'm really looking for is somebody, like I did up in Canada, I got a CPA to look after that for the Canadian side.
Sure.
What I'm looking for is somebody that can do it on the U.S. side.
Oh, we can do both of them for you. That's fine if we do one or the other or both. If you type income tax experts real estate beside it, you find out I come up number one in the world on Google out of about 12 million people. I've done thousands of U.S., Canada tax and real estate sales. And used to have offices down in Louisiana too.
Okay, well that's kind of like
In fact,
what I'm looking for.
And-
I guess I have for years. I've been in the States now, living since I left Edmonton 43 years ago.
okay,
And
so
I've always done my own taxes. They're pretty simple.
sure.
But this one is not on what I normally use, and that's a program, and you, I'm sure, are aware of it, TurboTax.
Well, TurboTax should do it for you.
Well, I can't find the right goddamn position, and like I told you, I've been using it for years, but I can't find the right location to insert this transaction.
All right, back when TurboTax was first getting going, back in 1985, 86, and 87, I was actually a consultant to them on the U.S. program.
Oh, great.
And it's gone through ChipSoft and Intuit and so on now, and the different varieties of it as it's gone along. And my original number, client number for my TurboTax was, I'm going to say it was 6238 or something or other. When I actually got a client number, now it's like 372,000 something or other. But or 3,726,000 or something. They made me get a new number a few years ago, and I was really pissed off at it, if I can use the vernacular. Anyway, making a long story short, if you want to send us a copy of the Canadian return and your U.S. W-2 slips and 1099s or something, more than happy to do it.
Well, I'd like to do that.
Okay. Now, have you got a pen and a paper there?
I'm ready.
Okay. If you write down the name Greg Samuels, S-A-M-U-E-L-S.
Just a second now. You said, maybe I'm hard of hearing, but Greg
Samuels, S-A-M-U-E-L-S.
S-A-M.
Yep, U-E-L-S.
L-E-M, yes.
And his phone number is 604
604
742
742
4242.
4242.
And just for the record, he's actually a New Orleans lawyer who practices in Vancouver, and he's licensed to practice in Canada and the States at the same time. Not that you need him now, you've already done your thing. But there's a guy, and I didn't even have to look up his phone number. He's a very qualified lawyer if you ever have a hassle that gets in your way on some of this stuff.
Well, you see, what's going to happen here, there's a dirty part of this story, and that is this money, when I left the country, God knows, back in 67, I had a small bank account up there.
Yeah.
And it was dormant all these years. But when this transaction, the first part of this transaction came abreast, they, CPA put that into my bank account in Edmonton.
Yes.
And I have got checks on that account, and I'm ready to transfer the major part of that back to the U.S.
Sure, there's no problem with that.
But over the years, I've not declared that bank account, which amounts to nothing really,
Well,
on my American taxes.
okay. But in 2009, you put the money in 2009, or is it 2010?
2009.
Okay. So for 2009, again on Schedule B of your 1040 tax return, you have to answer yes to question 7A. And then you have to fill in a form called a T for Tom or tax, TDF, Tax David,
TDS?
TDF,
F.
Tax David Frank.
Okay.
Okay.
Tax,
Yeah,
yes.
TDF 90-22.1.
90-22.1.
And you find that form at irs.gov. I don't know if the storefront version of TurboTax has it there, but it's in the professional version, the Pro Series version.